The first time the royal soldiers knelt to Matilda, every candle in the eastern ballroom seemed to lean toward her. A moment before, she had been standing beside the silver urns with a servant's tray in her hands, wearing the same gray dress Duke Benjamin Herbert's housekeeper had called suitable for a woman who owned nothing worth staining. The musicians had been playing a minuet. The court guests had been laughing beneath garlands of winter laurel. Duke Benjamin had been entertaining 3 ministers with a story about discipline, loyalty, and the danger of servants who forgot their place. Then the captain of the King's Guard entered through the gold doors, saw the locket at Matilda's throat, and went as white as linen. His sword left its scabbard by 1 inch. The sound was small. It silenced the room. Behind him, 20 soldiers in dark blue uniforms struck the marble floor with the butts of their muskets. One by one, they lowered themselves to their knees. "Your Majesty," the captain said. Matilda did not move. The tray in her hands held 6 glasses of port, 1 dish of sugared almonds, and the folded note that Duke Benjamin had tried to burn in the library hearth 3 hours earlier. Beneath her left sleeve, her wrist still ached where his ring had cut the skin when he struck her. Beneath her bodice, the old locket beat cold against her heart, opened for the first time in 15 years. Duke Benjamin turned slowly. At 42, he was still handsome in the way portraits are handsome, controlled, polished, deliberately lit. His dark hair was threaded with silver at the temples. His coat was black velvet. His hands, which had signed away tenants, purchased judges, and closed doors on inconvenient women, were perfectly steady until he saw the soldiers kneeling. "Captain," he said, with the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed before he finished speaking, "you are mistaken. That girl is my scullery maid." The captain did not look at him. "No, Your Grace," he said. "She is the blood of Eldoria." A murmur broke across the ballroom like ice splitting on a river. Matilda felt every eye find her. The women who had stepped around her skirts for years, the men who had handed her empty glasses without seeing her face, the guests who had laughed that afternoon when Benjamin told them a servant could be improved by fear, if not by wages. They stared now at the locket, at the crest hidden inside it, at the red stone cut like a drop of fire. Benjamin's gaze moved from the locket to her face. For the first time in 15 years, he did not look through her. He looked afraid. If you like stories where the forgotten rise with evidence in their hands and the powerful are forced to answer before witnesses, stay with this one. Matilda's silence was not weakness. It was a ledger, and tonight, every debt would be read aloud. 15 years earlier, Matilda had arrived at Herbert Estate in a grain cart before dawn. She remembered almost nothing of the road. Rain on canvas, a man's coat smelling of horse and smoke, a woman's voice whispering that she must not cry, no matter what name they gave her. She remembered fingers closing something cold around her neck, and a promise spoken too quickly for a child to understand. Hide this. Trust no one who asks for it. By morning, she was Matilda Gray, an orphan with no papers, no dowry, and no useful history. The Herbert steward entered her name in the servant ledger with a blunt pen and a bored hand. Under origin, he wrote unknown. Under value, he wrote kitchen use. The estate taught her invisibility as if it were a trade. She learned to walk without making floorboards complain. She learned which doors must never be opened, which guests drank too much, which ladies cried only after their carriages left. She learned that Duke Benjamin liked his coffee black, his boots warmed, and his library dusted only by servants who could not read. That was his first mistake. Matilda could read. No one knew who had taught her. She had no memory of lessons, only the strange certainty that letters were not marks, but doors. Latin came to her like a tune half remembered. French arranged itself politely. Old Eldorian, when she found it in marginal notes and sealed proclamations, touched some buried chamber in her mind and lit it from within. At night, when the household slept, she copied words from the Duke's discarded drafts onto scraps of flower paper. She cleaned ink from his desk and read the reverse impressions left on blotting sheets. She pieced together names from treaties, debts from account books, and lies from the spaces where documents should have been. Benjamin Herbert was not merely cruel. Cruelty was only the surface people noticed. He was exact. He understood that fear worked best when it looked like order. A maid dismissed for breaking porcelain could not complain that the porcelain had already been cracked. A tenant evicted for arrears could not prove the rent had been raised after his son joined a rival lord's militia. A widow who lost her cottage could not read the clause that stole it. Matilda read everything. For years, reading did not save her. It only made the house more unbearable, because she understood the machinery that crushed people and still had to polish its brass. Then came the afternoon of the Latin translation. The Duke was preparing for a council supper. Eldoria had no settled monarch since the coup that had murdered King Alaric and Queen Seraphine 15 years earlier. Regents had ruled in layers of suspicion, each faction insisting the royal child had died, each quietly searching in case she had not. Benjamin had grown rich during that uncertainty. He lent money to ministers. He hosted exiles. He purchased silence. On his desk lay a parchment newly arrived from the Abbey of St. Orison. Matilda saw the Latin while placing coals in the grate. Benjamin read aloud to Lord Vane, his political ally. The phrase confirms the Abbey transferred guardianship of the royal relics to the Herbert line. Matilda's hand froze over the coal scuttle. It did not say guardianship. It said witness. Benjamin noticed the stillness. "Something interests you, girl?" She should have lowered her eyes. She had survived 15 years by weighing every breath. But that word mattered. Witness meant the Abbey had not surrendered authority. Witness meant someone had recorded the truth elsewhere. "Your Grace," she said quietly, "custodia would be guardianship. Testimonium is witness." The Abbey was not granting possession, it was preserving testimony. Lord Vane laughed once, surprised. The Duke did not laugh. He rose. "Who taught you Latin?" "I do not know. Servants who mock their betters often say that." "I meant no mockery. The line is mistranslated." His hand moved so fast she saw the ring before she felt the blow. The sound struck the room harder than the pain. Matilda staggered against the desk. The coal scuttle fell. Ash scattered over the carpet like black snow. Benjamin leaned close enough for her to smell claret on his breath. "You will remember this. Knowledge in a servant is theft." For 1 second, the world narrowed to the red seal on the parchment, the broken coal at her feet, and the hot pulse at her cheek. She had been hungry, insulted, locked in pantries, made to scrub floors until her hands split. But this was different, not because he had hurt her, because he had struck her for touching the truth. Matilda lowered her eyes, not in surrender, to look at the paper he had knocked from the desk. On the underside, where wax had cracked, she saw the pressed shape of a crest, a hawk with a flame beneath its claw. The same crest was engraved on the back of the locket she had hidden under her shift since childhood. That night, she did not sleep. She waited until the west wing emptied after supper. She stole no key. She had made one 6 months earlier from a wax impression taken while polishing the Duke's desk. The library lock opened with a sigh. The parchment was gone, but Benjamin's habits were precise. Dangerous papers went either to the iron box behind the Virgil volumes or to the false bottom drawer beneath the globe. The iron box held leases. The globe drawer held letters. Matilda found 3. The first, dated 15 years earlier, was from an abbess begging Duke Benjamin's father to honor his oath and protect the child marked by the Phoenix Stone. The second was from a captain of the old royal guard, reporting that the infant princess had been carried through Herbert lands during the coup and hidden among common servants until the regent's assassins passed. The third was recent, in Benjamin's own hand, addressed to Lord Vane. If the girl has begun to read old seals, remove her before the winter ball. No body is necessary if no one asks after a maid. Matilda read it twice. Her fear became very quiet. A foolish woman would have run. Benjamin owned the roads, the magistrate, and the men who checked travel papers. A despairing woman would have wept. Matilda had done enough weeping in childhood to know it rarely opened doors. She folded the third letter and hid it in the lining of her apron. Then she opened the locket. It had resisted her for years. No hinge, no seam, only a red stone set into dull gold. But the abbess's letter mentioned the Phoenix Stone, and the Latin parchment had spoken of testimony. Matilda took the locket to the kitchen, held it above a candle, and watched heat wake lines beneath the metal. A seam appeared. Inside lay a miniature portrait of a woman with Matilda's gray eyes, a curl of pale hair, and a strip of vellum so thin it had been folded into a square no larger than a fingernail. The vellum bore 3 things: a royal cipher, a baptismal name, and a command written in Old Eldorian. When the hawk kneels to flame, summon the oath-bound. Matilda did not know how to summon soldiers. She knew how to summon servants. By dawn, every person Benjamin had trained himself not to see had become part of her design. Nell from the laundry carried a note inside a basket of sheets to the village apothecary, whose brother had served in the royal guard. Old Tomas, the groom, took the south road with a lame horse that was not lame at all. A kitchen boy who cried when shouted at proved able to climb the ivy beneath Lord Vane's window and return with the names of 2 assassins hired for the ball. The housekeeper, who had despised Matilda for being too quiet, gave her the pantry key after seeing the bruise on her cheek and hearing the words, "No body is necessary." "I always thought silence kept us safe," the woman said. Matilda tucked the letter into her sleeve. It only kept him comfortable. The winter ball arrived with snow at the windows and treason beneath the music. Benjamin dressed the house like a crown. Gold cloth covered the tables. Candles burned in mirrored branches. Ministers arrived with daughters, debts, and smiles sharpened for opportunity. Lord Vane came late, carrying a black walking stick and the satisfied expression of a man who had already purchased the ending. Matilda served port. She counted doors. 2 men by the garden entrance, 1 by the musicians, 1 near the stairs pretending to admire a portrait. The 4th had no patience for pretending and watched her directly. Benjamin noticed. Of course he noticed. He crossed the ballroom while the guests applauded a singer and caught Matilda near the silver urns. "You have been busy," he said softly. "I have been useful, Your Grace. You taught me that was my place." His eyes dropped to her throat. For the first time, the locket was visible. Something old and ugly moved behind his composure. "Give it to me." "No." It was the first time she had ever refused him with one word. His smile did not change, but his voice lost its polish. "You have mistaken a trinket for a shield. Bloodlines do not matter without witnesses. Witnesses can be bought or buried." Matilda lifted the tray slightly so he could see the folded note between the glasses. "Some witnesses write before they die." Benjamin's gaze sharpened. He reached for the note. She stepped back and the tray tilted. Port spilled across his white cuff like a dark wound. Guests turned. The musicians faltered. Lord Vane moved toward them, but Knelt opened a side door at precisely that moment and dropped a tower of folded linen into his path. He stumbled. The black walking stick struck the marble and split, revealing a narrow blade. Gasps burst from the guests. Matilda raised her voice. "Lord Vane has brought a concealed weapon into Duke Herbert's ballroom. Search the men at the doors." No one moved. Servants did not command rooms. Then the gold doors opened, and the captain of the royal guard entered. He had been younger in the letter Matilda found, but she knew the scar described by the abbess. Left brow, saber cut, Battle of Grey Ford. His eyes went first to the locket, then to the crest inside it, which Matilda held open with fingers that did not tremble. The soldiers knelt. "Your Majesty." The words did not make Matilda taller. They made the room smaller. They pulled every hidden thing into the light. Benjamin tried once more to command the ending. "This is theater," he said. "A servant girl coached by my enemies. Captain, I demand her arrest for theft, forgery, and conspiracy." Matilda turned toward him. For 15 years, she had answered from doorways, stairwells, and corners. Now she spoke from the center of the ballroom. "You may demand many things, Duke Herbert. You demanded silence from tenants whose leases you altered. You demanded obedience from widows whose sons you pressed into service. You demanded gratitude from servants you starved, struck, and dismissed without wages. Today you demanded my death before the winter ball." She unfolded his letter. The captain took it, read, and passed it to the minister nearest him. The minister's face drained of color. Benjamin looked not defeated, but calculating. Even now he measured exits, allies, damage. "A forged hand," he said. "Then read the Latin on the abbey parchment," Matilda replied. "Read it aloud, not as guardianship, as testimony." The old abbess entered then, supported by Thomas the groom and wrapped in a traveling cloak dusted with snow. She had ridden through the night with the second proof, the baptismal register of Princess Matilde Seraphine of Eldoria, hidden for 15 years beneath the altar stone of St. Orison. At the sight of her, Benjamin's control cracked. Only a little, only around the mouth, but Matilda saw it, and so did everyone watching him for weakness, now that weakness had become fashionable. The abbess bowed to Matilda. "I failed your mother by living afraid," she said. "I will not fail her by dying silent." The captain lifted his sword fully from the scabbard and placed it flat across his palms. "By oath sworn to King Alaric, Queen Seraphine, and the lawful blood of Eldoria, I recognize Matilda Seraphine, hidden heir of the Phoenix line. Command us." The ballroom waited for spectacle. Perhaps they expected tears, perhaps forgiveness, perhaps a trembling girl overcome by sudden elevation. Matilda thought of the kitchen candle opening the locket. She thought of Nell's red hands, Tomas on the south road, the housekeeper's shame, the boy on the ivy, the widows who could not read the clauses that ruined them. She thought of her own silence, long and sharp enough to become a blade. "Seal the doors," she said. The soldiers rose. Arrest Lord Vane and his armed men. Place Duke Benjamin Herbert under guard pending inquiry for conspiracy against the crown, falsification of legal instruments, and attempted murder. Secure his library before any paper is burned. Bring every servant ledger, tenant lease, and private correspondence to the east table. No guest leaves until statements are taken. Orders move through the room like weather. Benjamin stared at her. You would do this to me? After all these years in my house? Matilda looked at the bruised dark mark on her wrist, then at the man who had mistaken ownership for power. No, she said. I do this because of all these years in your house. For the first time, he had no answer ready. The soldiers took him beside the same marble column where, that morning, he had told a minister that servants were most honest when frightened. His guests watched him pass. Some stepped back as if disgrace could stain silk. Others bowed to Matilda too deeply and too late. She accepted none of it as love. Power revealed faces. It did not improve them. At midnight, when the statements were signed and the first wagons of seized papers left for the capital, Matilda stood alone in the library. The room smelled of wax, ash, and old leather. On the desk lay the Latin parchment that had begun the unraveling. Testimonium. Witness. She touched the word gently. The captain waited by the door. Your Majesty, the council will ask where you wish to go first. The palace is prepared. Matilda looked around the library where she had once dusted spines she was forbidden to read. Not the palace, she said. He hesitated. Then where? The village court. At dawn. We begin with the leases. Outside, the snow had stopped. Servants stood in the corridor, not hiding now, but watching. Knelt, Tomas, the kitchen boy, the housekeeper, faces tired, frightened, hopeful in ways they did not yet trust. Matilda closed the locket. She had been born to a throne, hidden in a kitchen, educated by stolen pages, and crowned by a room that had spent 15 years refusing to see her. But when she walked out of the library, she did not walk like a rescued princess. She walked like a woman who had learned the exact weight of every locked door, and now held the keys.